On April 10, 1912, this incredible ship, the RMS Titanic, the biggest, most luxurious vessel anyone had ever seen, set sail on its very first voyage. It was this floating symbol of human achievement, packed with everyone from the super wealthy to immigrants hoping for a new life. So, how did this dream voyage turn into one of the most famous nightmares in history? Let's get into it.
The buzz around its launch was just off the charts. The company that built it, White Star Line, was so unbelievably confident that their own vice president went on record saying the ship was unsinkable. And look, this wasn't just some clever marketing slogan. People genuinely believed that technology had finally, truly conquered the open sea.
But just 4 days into that first trip, that belief was completely shattered. Over 1,500 people lost their lives in the freezing Atlantic. The question that we're still asking over a century later is pretty simple. How on earth did the unsinkable ship sink on its maiden voyage?
To really wrap our heads around the tragedy, we've got to first understand the legend. What made everyone so sure that the Titanic was invincible? Well, it really was a marvel for its time, a true icon of an era of incredible invention.
Just look at the money that went into it. It cost $7.5 million to build back then, which today is the equivalent of about $400 million. This wasn't just a ship, it was a floating palace, a statement to the world about progress.
And the luxury inside? It was on a whole other level, seriously rivaling the fanciest five-star hotels on land. We're talking these huge, sweeping grand staircases, a heated swimming pool, which was unheard of, a Turkish bath, a gym, a squash court, multiple high-end restaurants, and even its own library. For first class, it was the absolute height of elegance.
But the real secret sauce behind that unsinkable claim was its safety design. The ship's hull was divided into 16 watertight compartments. The idea was simple. Even if you had a breach and a few compartments flooded, the ship would stay afloat. The design could actually handle up to 4 of these compartments flooding at once, a level of damage that, at the time, was considered completely impossible.
But as the Titanic steamed across the Atlantic, this masterpiece of engineering was heading straight for disaster. And it wasn't because of one single mistake, but a whole chain reaction, a cascade of human errors where critical warnings were just ignored.
So on April 14th, the ship's radio room starts getting messages about ice. The first one comes in the morning, then more in the afternoon. By the time evening rolled around, they had received at least 7 different warnings about massive icebergs floating right in their path, and yet the ship never slowed down.
And this leads to the one question that has haunted this story for over 100 years. With so much clear danger being reported, why in the world would you keep racing at nearly full speed through a known ice field in the middle of the night?
Well, the answer seems to be this toxic mix of arrogance and business pressure. See, crossing the Atlantic was a super competitive business. And it's widely believed that J. Bruce Ismay, the chairman of the whole company who just happened to be on board, was pressuring the captain to keep the speed up. The goal? To get a huge publicity win by arriving in New York ahead of schedule. He wanted to prove that Titanic wasn't just the most luxurious ship, but also one of the fastest.
That decision would turn out to be fatal. At 11:40 p.m., a lookout spotted an iceberg dead ahead. They tried to turn, but it was just too late. So now let's look at the moment of impact and see exactly how those celebrated safety features failed so completely. The fatal problem wasn't that the iceberg hit the ship, but how it hit. It didn't ram it head on. Instead, it scraped along the side, basically popping rivets and punching holes along the hull like a giant can opener. This breached not 4, but 6 of the watertight compartments. The unsinkable design, which could only handle 4, was completely overwhelmed. The ship was doomed.
As the ship started its slow, unavoidable slide into the ocean, a second horrifying truth became painfully clear. There were only enough lifeboats for about 1,200 people, even though there were over 2,200 passengers and crew on board. Why? Because the company felt that more lifeboats would just clutter up the deck of their unsinkable ship. It meant that even with a perfect evacuation, hundreds of people were guaranteed to die.
The end was just terrifyingly quick. The bow filled with water, which lifted the enormous stern high up into the night sky. The stress on the middle of the ship became too much to bear, and the whole thing just snapped in two. By 2:20 a.m., only 2 hours and 40 minutes after hitting the ice, the Titanic was gone.
So as the Titanic slipped beneath the waves, the freezing water was filled with over 1,000 people. Their only hope was rescue, and rescue needed to be fast. And this is where the tragedy gets even worse, with one of history's most painful what-ifs. There was another ship nearby, a ship that saw their distress signals and did nothing.
That ship was the SS Californian, and it was just 37 kilometers away. I mean, that is agonizingly close. It had actually stopped for the night because it was surrounded by the exact same ice field the Titanic had just charged into. The Californian was close enough to have saved nearly everyone.
Looking at this timeline is just chilling. The Californian's radio operator signed off for the night just minutes before the Titanic hit the iceberg. When the Titanic started firing white distress rockets, the universal signal for a ship in serious trouble, the Californian's crew saw them. They woke up their captain, who, incredibly, just dismissed them. He suggested it was probably just the rich people on the fancy new liner having a party. They took no action.
So, when you really look at it, this was never just about a technology failure. It was a massive human failure on so many different levels. But from this unbelievable tragedy, the world learned some very hard lessons that would change maritime safety forever.
The disaster led directly to brand new, sweeping safety rules. The International Ice Patrol was created to track icebergs in the North Atlantic. A treaty called SOLAS, or Safety of Life at Sea, was signed, which made it the law for ships to carry enough lifeboats for every single person on board. And a 24-hour radio watch became mandatory on all passenger ships.
For over 70 years, the Titanic was lost, a ghost in the deep ocean. It was finally discovered in 1985, lying in two pieces almost 4 kilometers below the surface. But today, the wreck itself is literally disappearing. There's a bacteria that's eating away its metal hull, and scientists think it'll be completely gone by the year 2030.
And this brings us to one last thought. As the physical ship crumbles back into the ocean, its story isn't going anywhere. So what do you think is the one lesson from the Titanic, whether it's about our faith in technology, our own arrogance, or just human nature, that we should make sure never, ever fades away?